Hi, Blue Wire listeners. I'm Greg Olson. I'm excited to partner with Blue Wire to bring you TE1, a podcast where I interview the tight ends who have revolutionized the position. Listen in as I have raw, in-depth conversations with the all-time greats like Shannon Sharpe, Tony Gonzalez, Travis Kelce, and George Kittle. We'll explore how the tight end position has changed over the last 60 years and what it takes to be the very best. Subscribe to TE1 from Blue Wire Studios today, so you're ready for the August premiere.
What is up, Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favali. We are here dropping part 2 of our biggest question for every Western Conference team in the NBA's Disney campus. Part 1 was dropped yesterday. We talked about the Suns, Spurs, Kings, Pelicans, Blazers, Grizzlies, and Mavericks with the Athletics and Bleacher Report's Dakhil. Today, he is back, and we're going to talk about the Rockets, Thunder, Jazz, Nuggets, Clippers, and Lakers. Again, be sure to check out Part 1 if you haven't done so already. Very quickly, though, however, just want to shout out our sponsors for this podcast, BetOnline and Deal Dash. You'll be hearing from them throughout the episode in just a few moments. But without further delay, let's get back into the biggest question for every remaining Western Conference team with Dakhil.
The team after them, the 6-seeded Houston Rockets, is so bizarre. I know the seeds are going to change in the meat and potatoes of the West, but the Rockets being the 6th seed when they're 16 games over 500 is still kind of melting my brain here. But
the West, man, the West.
Hashtag the West. What's your question for them, or what are you watching with them while they're in Disney? I think I can guess this one.
Go ahead and guess, because we all know it.
You want to know how Nano Ball is going to play out?
Yes, basically. I mean, I think, we saw moments where it looked really good for the Rockets, and then we saw them struggle right into that, league play ending. They had losses to like Orlando, to Charlotte, I think, and one to the Knicks, which was shocking for everybody. And then they got completely destroyed by the Clippers. I think it's a tough thing to ask these guys to play small ball for so long, and a full 48-minute game, and then going into the playoffs and things when things ramp up. Like, it's a pressure situation for them. It's interesting because it's a nice zig to everybody zagging, but this is a tough one, and I don't know if it's going to work. And ultimately, the hard thing too is, Dan, they don't have anybody on the bench, big guy wise, that they can go to. Like, Tyson Chandler is 1,000 years old. No offense to him. Bruno Caboclo. There we go. Caboclo. I think that's how you say it. But I can't even say his name. Like, that's how important he's been to the league so far. 2 years away from being 2 years. It's just like they don't have size. Their biggest guy that they're going to play is Jeff Green. And it's like, you're going to run into...
he was even on their team.
He's been good. He's been good in the scrimmages for them. But, like, what are you going to do when you play a team like the Lakers and, maybe your small ball works, but if it doesn't, you have no ability to pivot. You're just going to go smaller.
I reject you just insulting the Brazilian Kevin Durant, because Caboclo at center lineups are obviously going to be fantastic defensively. But
if he ever makes it out of quarantine, the dude keeps having to – he didn't understand the first quarantine, had to go in for 10 days.
That is true. I'm totally with you there. And they're basically punting on, I know they've been okay on the offensive glass during Tucker at center lineups, but they're basically punting on the rebounding battle every single game or series, however you look at it. And then you already talked about the toll it takes on players. The other thing that I think we need to talk more about is, maybe it's not as big of a concern, but is Russell Westbrook going to continue playing like he was during all this? From when Capella left the rotation, which was before he was traded because he was injured, Russ is averaging 31 points, 5.8 assists, 57.5 true shooting percentage. 56% of his looks are coming inside 5 feet compared to 46.3 beforehand. That's a huge difference, and he's finishing better there as well. And so I think this is a no-brainer in the sense that this is how Russell Westbrook always should have been integrated to every team, like including Oklahoma City. Surround him with shooters. It took way too long for him to get here, but are we just going to see him continue to keep up this level of play? Because they do need him to be there. I think it's great that James Harden is going to be, in theory, as fresh as he's been for the playoffs since leaving Oklahoma City. But like, you still need Russ to be that superhuman version of Russ. And if there's still a higher variance caked into his game-to-game performances, that's going to end up costing you as well, because you are going to give some trade-off in certain matches with small ball to begin with. And so you don't necessarily have that margin for error when you're talking about the second best player on your team.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the truth of the matter is they've kind of built this team on the fly around Russell Westbrook. You know, them going small benefits Westbrook more than anybody else on the team.
Yeah, 100%.
It's him being able to drive to the hoops. It's created more driving lanes for him. It's been their bread and butter. So, like, if this is going to work, Westbrook has to continue that. And look, he's came into the bubble a little bit late. He's working it through. I mean, he hasn't been spectacular in the two scrimmages they've played so far. They have one more tonight, but like
he's taking a lot of Russell Westbrooky shots.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that's like worrisome, right? Like, are we getting back to old Russ like that? We can't have. And to the Rockets' credit and to D'Antoni's credit, they're trying to get more ball movement, get a little bit away from so much ISO ball. And they're moving it from side to side. There have been some interesting looks that I've seen so far in how they've played. But, it comes down to that question, man. It's small ball, and can Russ continue to be effective? Because if Russ isn't effective, small ball is not going to work for them.
Do you hate any particular playoff matchup for them?
I hate the Clippers for them because I think the Clippers have a better small ball lineup.
Right. They could go with not just even Marcus Morris at the 5, but even having JaMychal Green at the 5 might give them a little bit of an advantage too.
Whenever your small ball lineup has Paul George and Kawhi Leonard on the floor,
that's fair too.
Like, how are you beating that? Like,
right.
It doesn't. I could be on the floor; it wouldn't matter. Like it's those two guys add so much to the team on both ends of the court. Like, that's such a big difference for that team, and that's a matchup. That's something I would, if I was the Rockets, I'd be messing around with the seeding a little bit to make sure I don't get them in the second round.
Yeah, there feels like there could be some seeding shenanigans somewhere in the West where people might, the lower seeds might want to play the Nuggets, or maybe some teams want to match up with the Jazz.
Yeah.
Which this next team currently matched up with the Jazz, the 5th seeded Oklahoma City Thunder. Definitely, look, even if you expected them to stand pat through the trade deadline this season, I don't think anyone expected them to be in play for a top 3 playoff seed in the West. So they've been a surprise in every sense to me. What are you watching for, looking for, asking about them?
I'm just curious if they can continue what they were doing in the clutch. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they were just so good in the clutch situations, and a lot of that came from Chris Paul. This is a fun team. They got a lot of interesting things going. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a star in the making, dude. Like, he's fantastic. And the fun thing is, it looks like Chris Paul's really enjoying kind of mentoring him. Dennis Schroeder is up there for 6th man of the year. Whether he wins it or not, it's a different story, but like, he definitely deserves votes. The guy that constantly gets forgotten is Danilo Gallinari.
So good.
Yeah, he's so good on so many levels. Like, he's a lot better defender than teams really kind of fans and teams really understand. And that's just from years of teams going at him defensive, on the offensive end, going like, we're going to attack him. And he's improved defensively. He's not like a stopper or anything, but it's not an automatic bucket going up against him. And I think, they have an interesting team. They're a team that can get hot and scare a lot of teams.
Right. And I almost want to throw their 9-17 record against above 500 teams out the window. It's definitely a concern, but they were 17-5 of their last 22 games entering the shutdown. And as you mentioned with their crunch time net rating, they have the best crunch time net rating in the league by a mile. Chris Paul is slashing 54, 36, 94 in crunch time, which is absolutely ridiculous. Dennis Schroeder's been great for them. He's shooting well from basically everywhere on the court. I love Gallinari. If they want to play small, they could really move him to the 5, and they have for certain possessions if they wanted to. And my question is basically the same as yours. It might just be a little bit more big picture in the sense, like, forget about even just this season. Are they playing themselves into a different timeline? Because I still think people default to, well, Adams and Schroeder are going to be free agents in 2021. You have Gallinari's entering free agency this summer. Chris Paul's owed almost $86 million over the next 2 years. They're going to eventually bust this up. But if they win a playoff series or come close to winning 2, like, do you default to them busting it up? And so there's like, to me at least, it seems like there are some pretty big picture implications to how they fare during this postseason.
I think it starts with a conversation with Chris Paul. Like, Sam Presti sitting down with him and going like, how do you feel? Like, are you enjoying, like, it looks like Chris is having a hell of a time, and we all thought he was going to be miserable in Oklahoma City. But look like he's found kind of a great place to play. It's a perfect setup for him. They don't rely on him a whole bunch during the game until crunch time. And that's why his numbers are so absurd. He's rested, and he's in that scenario. He's found a really good place. For me, I kind of hope he stays there. I think this is a good spot for him. Continue to mentor SGA and even Dennis Schroeder to a degree. I think, for them, if he's like, hey, I'm in, I think they have a great situation just because they got 55 million draft picks over the next few years from the trades they've made.
On that one.
Okay. They got a lot of stuff. They can start to make things happen. I think if they could find a way to sign Gallinari to a team-friendly deal, I think it makes sense. I think Adams is there a guy that fits Oklahoma City better than Steven Adams? I mean, he just kind of fits. I can't imagine him in another uniform. Schroeder might be a difficult thing. Maybe you're willing to punt on him, maybe not. But, with all the assets you have, you can really kind of build this team while you're not even taking a step back. And I think that's something that, would be interesting for Presti to look at. And I think it all starts with what does Chris Paul want? And
there's also, you mentioned the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander factor, is because even if you tear this down, there's the argument of, well, Shai is already good enough to where you're never going to be bad enough to fully tank anyway. And so why not try to straddle those two timelines like you're talking about?
Yeah, it just makes sense, that's the best of both worlds, right? If you can be a playoff team and have a bunch of draft picks, which don't necessarily have to use the picks, but you can turn the picks around into another piece, and things like that. Like you're in a good scenario, in a good situation. So I kind of like where the Thunder are going right now.
Hardwood Knocks listeners, have you ever heard of DealDash.com? It's the best, most honest bidding site where you can win things you'd never expect at a price you'd never believe. They have over 1,000 auctions every day on electronics, appliances, beauty products, home decor, and even cars. Here's how it works. It's like an auction, but every item starts at $0 and only goes up 1 cent every time you bid. The kicker is that the auction clock restarts after just 10 seconds. That means every time you bid, everyone else has 10 seconds to answer or the item is yours. If you go ahead and buy now, DealDash is offering our listeners an extra 100 free bids upon sign up on top of their other discounts. Go to DealDash.com and use the offer code KNOX, or go to DealDash.fm/Knox. That's DealDash.fm/Knox. DealDash.fm/Knox.
After the Thunder, we move into the currently 4th-seeded Utah Jazz. What are you watching for, wondering about them as we get to the regular season restart?
Man, I'm watching Mike Conley. All eyes are on him. And I think, he started out slow. He picked it up in February and March. I think was averaging around 16 points a game. Was beginning to slowly look like Mike Conley again. And with the Bogdanovich injury, it's huge for them. They've lost 20-point scorer. They're going to need people to pick up the slack. Now, he's not going to pick up all of it, but he needs to pick up at least half. Like, he needs to jump in there and start going to work and start being the Mike Conley that we all thought the Utah Jazz were getting. I mean, people had them as dark horse contenders, and I think that was the thing we need to watch for with the Jazz, and that's what's going to matter the most with Conley. And I think, they're only going to go as far as he can take them, and it sucks to put that pressure on him. But on the flip side, too, like, you watch some of these pictures you see from these dudes in the bubble practices and stuff like that. He's another dude that looks like he's having fun, he's doing these, he's rolling on the ground, dribbling, picking up, shoot, and things like that, and having fun with it. I think this is an important thing to see there. And I think, for the Jazz, that really matters.
Mike Conley was mine as well. I think he's also slated to leave. Like, his wife is supposed to have a baby at some point during the restart, and so that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think maybe I'm misspeaking, but that would increase the variance of performance for them a great deal, and you're already dealing with the absence of Bojan Bogdanovic, and so there are all these trickle-down effects. There are almost too many things for me to watch and consider with the Jazz. It's so bizarre because they really only went all in on this team over the summer for the first time when they signed Bogdanovic, when they traded for Mike Conley, and yet their window feels more fragile than it should be after only making that move because Gobert is Supermax eligible. Who knows how the relationship between he and Donovan Mitchell impacts the way that they view their team. And if Mike Conley isn't the Mike Conley you traded for, you're all of a sudden in big trouble, particularly without Bogdanovic, because we've seen Donovan Mitchell struggle in his first 2 postseasons when I don't think it's through any fault of his own. He doesn't have other teammates to create their own looks. And then last year it was exacerbated by the fact that his teammates couldn't even hit their wide open threes. And so Conley right now ends up being the biggest swing piece for them, even more so than how are you going to fill minutes on the wings, just because they need to make life easier on Donovan Mitchell. And Bojan Bogdanovic was at least someone you knew was going to do that. He was their 3rd best player this year, probably by far, and definitely their 2nd best offensive player behind Mitchell. And if Conley leaves, maybe he doesn't have to leave. Maybe I'm wrong. Listeners can get me there.
No, I Googled it while you were talking. For once, I did some investigative work.
And for once, I'm correct.
Yes, you are. His wife is due August 27th, so that's pretty late in the playoffs too. I don't know how far they're going to go anyway. So
that's a good point too. It's like, can they even win a series like this? But there's definitely, I'm with you on Conley. He's one of the biggest playoff swing factors now because you don't have that Bogdanovic as a safety net, and we know how Mitchell has struggled when faced with that playoff defense pressure in the past.
Yeah, and so it's going to be interesting to come down to it, and Mitchell too. Like he's got to kind of start to step up and start showing flashes. I think he was pretty good. Yeah, I mean, he had a phenomenal rookie year, blew up on the scene. Was okay last year, and I think this year he's been good but not great. And I think, and part of it's our fault, putting a lot of hype and things into it. But, is he the guy we think he is, or is he something else? There's a lot of talk of him being like Dwayne Wade. Well, Dwayne Wade was pretty damn good, folks.
Dwayne Wade can get to the foul line.
Yeah, and so that's my question is what are we going to see from Mitchell as well? But for me, ultimately, it comes down to can Conley pick up the slack for Bogdanovic?
Now, since you spent so much time working for NBA teams, this is a good question for you. Does the Gobert Mitchell dynamic actually matter looking forward, or is that being just over dramatized in the grand scheme of things?
It matters. I mean, I don't know to what degree. It's different, obviously, not being with them, but team chemistry matters, man. Like, that's a big deal, and feeling like you have each other's backs. And anytime there's some sort of discord amongst the team, you can kind of, it leads to other things, I'm going to plug my man, Tim McMahon. He had a great piece there about the relationship. Piece,
yeah.
And just kind of, it's just sort of the irritating stuff, right? It's okay. You already kind of have this issue, and now you're not passing me the ball. Like, what the hell? Or you know what I mean? Or you're always asking for the ball, Rudy. Like, you're not always open, or I'm going to miss you sometimes. Like, there's that kind of element there, and it just kind of slowly builds and stuff like that. So it's hard. I mean, chemistry matters so much for teams in that sense of, especially in this scenario in the bubble, because you don't get to go home and complain to your significant other or your boys or something like that. You're around these dudes 24/7 at this point. Like, it's a small part of the bubble that actually, no, it's an important part of the bubble that doesn't get enough recognition by people. I've been on these road trips. I've been on 2-week long road trips with the Clippers during the Grammys. I'm telling you, 7 days in, I don't want to see a single person on the travel party anywhere near me. You know what I mean? Like, we go through these stages, and these are people who are like family to me. Some of these guys I still talk to on a daily basis in terms of just checking in with each other. And it's like, it's like, I remember it clearly. We got into one city. I think it was Charlotte, and like one of the dudes was like, "Yo, you want to grab dinner?" I'm like, "Bro, I don't want to see your face for a day."
Oh, how polite of you!
And no, but I mean, like, and he kind of looked at me. He's like, "No, I get it. Like, we had been, and because we've been together for so long, it's just like, yo, honestly, I'm just grabbing something to go, and I'm just sitting in my room and vegging out. Like, it's you have that, and now these dudes are doing that for 3 months, Dan. Like, that's insane."
Yeah, that's an under talked about aspect of it, and then we've seen pieces published on it too. Is just the mental health aspect of it in general. So not just getting sick of people, but when you don't even have your normal access to other people in your close circle at all. That's how is that going to impact you? And does that demeanor exacerbate any of the pre-existing problems? I tend to, as someone who I would say, what do they call it, bleeding heart or a sentimentalist? Like I want players, you assume when I was younger that because they played for the same team, they were friends. Or now I'll compare it to if you're a fan of a band, you want to assume that they're all friends and that this isn't a business relationship, but ultimately is, and you don't need them to be best friends. I think what makes it more complicated is both of them are approaching new contracts, and while Donovan Mitchell is firmly under team control looking at restricted free agency, Gobert is just entering this weird territory because he's a generational defender. If you want to say he's defensive player of the year, even though I would vote for Giannis, I wouldn't give you a huge argument. He is so very good, a top 15, 20 player in the league, and yet I don't know that you can get away with putting that type of money in him moving forward. And if he's not getting along with the player who's more important to your future because of the position he plays, because of the player archetype that he is, that's why it just seems like it might be a little bit more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah, the contract situation for Rudy is difficult. And to be honest, before all of this, I was just in my Mo conversations, was wondering.
We need recordings of these Mo conversations.
No, but Mo does not want that. Not me, the other Mo.
We need a third Mo to record it against the second Mo's wishes.
Or just D'Angelo Russell.
Wow.
Cheap shot. Sorry, guys. That was just me being mean. Quarantine has changed me.
I'm still laughing at that one. That's Mo with a mustache having an edge to him.
Yeah. I've turned evil.
Although it's probably not a surprise that you're shit talking a Timberwolf on this podcast. That should actually come as a non-shock.
Had to bring it in somehow. My question was like, how much are you going to pay Rudy when he's still limited? Right? Like, let's put it to you this way. In Philly, if you run a pick and roll and you switch a small onto Embiid, it's an automatic post up, right? In Utah, it's not, because Rudy doesn't have that great of a post up game. And also part of it should be said too is Donovan Mitchell now has big on him. Might want to attack that as well. But it's not a thing where you could mix it in. It's just how much are you going to invest in a guy who I think he might be up for the Supermax?
Yeah, he is.
And that's a difficult situation. Like, Rudy, we're not paying you the Supermax. Like, okay,
hopefully that's been said already, because there's under no circumstances should he be given the Supermax.
No, but like even just a regular max is difficult for a team. But also they're not a free agent destination. Like, they struggle to bring in free agents. But my thoughts are like, can you flip Rudy for a couple of pieces and be serviceable with just an average big man? And
you feel dirty asking, or at least I do, asking that question, but it's also a fair one because it seems easier to approximate a lot of the value that Rudy Gobert brings. You're never going to fully approximate the defensive value that he brings, but overall, in net, on balance, you could probably put together a facsimile of what he does in your center rotation for what's going to end up being much cheaper than he'll cost you beyond next season. Or even in next season.
No, it's and you say it's dirty. I said, this is what front office work is. I
feel like I'm crapping all over a player who's actually really good.
The unfortunate thing, like, here's the thing, Dan, it's hard because he's really damn good. Is he $160 million good? Can I survive with 60% of a Rudy Gobert at 90 million? And by the way, 90 million is still a crap ton of money. But like, let me ask you this question. How different are the Jazz if you replace Rudy Gobert with Clint Capella?
I don't know. I think because he's such a rim deterrent that Clint Capella isn't, and he is stronger than Clint Capella, there would be a drop off, but
how massive?
I don't know. It's a fair question.
And is it so massive that it's a difference in? I mean, Capella's getting like 90. Over
5 and 90. Yeah,
5 and 90, and then you have Gobert, let's just assume he wants the max, which is, I don't know. I'm throwing the numbers out, folks. Don't get mad at me. I don't do.
I can tell you. I mean, these numbers will be wrong because I'm just assuming that
I'd rather you say it and be wrong, and then I just say later I can blame you. So go ahead.
I'm just assuming that the cap is going to drop. But if he signs a supermax, it's 5 years and $253.8 million.
Just the regular max. What's the regular max?
The regular max for him would be $4,196.
Okay, so you're going to pay a dude $100 million.
If he went regular max, it'd be $4,168 or $5,217.5.
Okay, let's just say 4 and 168. Let's just take the low number of that. Is he $70 million? Is that difference in value, financial value, going to show up that much on the court? Like, I don't know. I would rather in a bubble or a vacuum rather just have Rudy Gobert over Clint Capella. But when you put the contracts in there, then I'm like, I might be leaning Capella and see if I can add some more guys to the team.
And look, right now maybe it's fine, because Rudy is making, what is he, $26 million next year. That's not something that, just because he's still so good. The other factor of this is that this next contract's going to take him into his early to mid 30s. And so depending on how long he signs it for, obviously. And so 26.5 next year, what am I paying? Do I still want Rudy Gobert over Clint Capella in that situation? Next year, yes. We want to talk about moving forward. That's where you really get into the tough questions.
And then that's where you start to figure out, like, is there a trade out there? And that's the tough scenarios. And that's the conversation sometimes that the front office has got to have that you hope never leaks.
And that's what's also, it feels like I'm like, denigrating Rudy Gobert, but it's not who is going to throw out the massive offer on the trade market for Rudy Gobert. I think people have like broached Brooklyn, but they think that DeAndre Jordan's the best center in the world. So why are they going to go?
I love DJ, but come on.
Hey, it's better than Jared Allen, apparently. But it's like, what team is going to come and just make the massive offer? Like, yeah, maybe you can count on the Knicks to nick, but like, that might be a fair question is, can the Jazz get by with a Mitchell Robinson and then whatever filler they're able to get from that trade package? That's probably a bad example just because the Knicks have all bad players on their roster. But I don't look at a team and say, you know what, they should go out and try and trade for Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, it's a tough scenario. It's going to be, and that was all stuff I was thinking before Donovan Mitchell and the rift was reported,
right.
So that's that's another wrinkle you got to add to it. It's just, man, front office jobs are hard, people. Everybody always thinks they can do it. I'm just telling you, it's a flat out lie.
I'm totally with you. It's tough to build up a contender in there, and just a more tenuous situation, it seems, because of all the factors involved, plus the ancillary investments that they've already made, Bogdanovich trading for Conley and all that. But not to keep you here all day as we're closing in on Denver Nuggets, the 3 seed. As of now, what are you watching, looking for, asking about them leading into the NBA's regular season restart?
Denver is a team that this might get me in a little bit of trouble. I don't know. This is the year we're going to find out if they're paper tigers or not, right? Like, everybody talks about how great they are, and they're a talent. And I love Jokic. Jokic is a phenomenal player. This isn't a shot at Jokic or things like that. I do lose it a little bit when Denver people want to talk about how much better he is defensively. And he may have improved defensively, but he ain't good defensively. Let's just stop with this nonsense. If the coach has to take you out in clutch defensive situations and go offense, defense with you, your own coach doesn't believe you're a good enough defender. So let's pump the brakes there, folks. But is this team going to take that next step to being actual contenders? They're great in the regular season. They had a good run last year in the playoffs, and it was their first playoffs, getting it all the way to the second round, 2 Game 7s, 1-1, lost 1. Tough scenario in that situation, but like, can they kind of break through? And the tough thing too is they got to find a way to break through against the Lakers and Clippers, like, and we're going to get to them, but like, that's a tough crowd to crack. And that's the situation they're in. And now, we're just going to start to look at, people are going to pick them to lose in the first round, by the way, depending on who they match up with.
If they play the Rockets, which is who they're matched up with now, I don't know who I would pick. I'd probably have to dig deeper into it, but my guess would be Houston's favored.
It'd be close. I mean, at the very least, it'd be one of those things where like, I could see both teams winning, but I'll take whatever situation. But like, it'd be a tough series. And I think even if they played Dallas, people would start kind of going at, and have those questions. So they're in that tough spot there. So for me, the real question is, are the Nuggets who everybody seems to think they are, or are they paper tigers?
And I'm with you on there. And my more nuts and bolts question for them would be, just assuming that Jokic's weight loss doesn't change how effective he is, because I do think just the way he plays, it could be more impactful than what's happened with Marc Gasol. But I'm just wondering, how do they just fare guarding bigger wings? Do they have enough depth and size on the wings in general? They do have the league's third best 3-point defense, but opponents are shooting just 35.1% on open threes against them. And so that feels like a little bit of luck might be involved. And if you're looking at your best wing defender as Gary Harris or even a Torrey Craig, that's not the worst spot to be in, but neither of those guys are really huge. And you also want a wing who could maybe give you that extra layer of shot creation on the offensive end when things bog down in crunch time, because Jokic has been phenomenal in crunch time, but you need that other outlet, and Jamal Murray is there. Jamal Murray is really good. Jamal Murray is also really inconsistent, and I don't know that we're at a point, even though they paid him like one, that you can say he's a viable number 2 on a title team. And this doesn't answer any of my defensive questions, but looking at it offensively, is there a chance they end up leaning on Michael Porter Jr. more as he gets more ready, since I think he only just started playing in the scrimmages? Rick Carlisle hasn't really given him consistent minutes this year, and why would you?
It'd be tough for Rick Carlisle
when the stakes are higher.
Consistent.
Yeah, and so if you take him out, what happens with your wing?
No, listen to me, Dan.
I'm listening.
It would be very difficult for Rick Carlisle.
Oh wow, Mike Malone.
God, just because they both have shaved heads, man.
They look too similar to me, but yeah, excuse me. Mike Malone hasn't played MPJ consistently, and why would you start when the stakes are so high with what's, a rookie? So, but he also feels like someone who could elevate their offensive ceiling. I still question what they're going to be able to do defensively in many of the playoff matchups, though. And so that comes back to your paper tiger question about them, too. I do think a lot of people do tend to just write them off, and there might still be this stigma against Jokic. They are really ridiculously good. There's still a separation between really ridiculously good and the Clippers, Lakers / legitimate title contention.
Right. And first off the bat, let's just get rid of this stigma of Jokic. Right.
He should be consensus top 7, and I might put him in top 5.
Like, look, he's never gonna have the ripped NBA body we all wish, he had. Like, he's never gonna look like me.
6 a day orange theory, Mo Dakhil, peak NBA fitness.
But he's just, and there are things he does that I hate. I hate the constant complaining. I hate the eye rolls on the court and the
frustration,
throw your hands up kind of stuff and things like that. Like, I hate that stuff. But the dude can play flat out. Like, let's just stop with this stigma of whether how good Jokic is. If you're asking yourself how good is Jokic and you're seriously not understanding it, you need to just go watch baseball, man. Like, this ain't for you. This sport ain't for you then, because he can play. Now, I have questions too about him losing a lot of weight, because I think it does affect you in the post to a degree, especially because he was very physical in the post. So yep. I think there's some of that to it. I don't know how much. I don't have a way to quantify it. Everything you said is spot on, though. Jamal Murray is still very inconsistent, so I'm nervous counting on him. They don't have a third guy that I feel confident in that's, okay, these are the 3 guys I trust. The Michael Porter Jr. is still a while away. It's hard. Like, I understand it from Malone's perspective.
Don't you mean Rick Carlisle?
Yeah, well, you do. I understand it from his perspective, because the kid's still young and figuring out how to play and things like that. And this is just a tough scenario to throw him into. So, this is going to be a situation, but this is a kind of a prove me moment, and people are, listen, if they get out of the first round, for me, that's a success. That's the kind of way I look at it, because I just don't think they're good enough to be in the conference finals.
Yeah, but can you constitute it as a success when you've reinvested in Murray? Millsap's going to be a free agent. Jeremy Grant, if he declines his player option, could be a free agent. This seems like a playoff push that I don't think they're not a team that overreacts, but it could have some long-term implications on how they build this team. And just to back up your point on how reliant they are of Jokic just operating from the post. Neither of us can talk today. He's 2nd in elbow touches and 5th in post-ups per game. And so if you lose a physicality edge there in any way, he has the range to he can put the ball on the floor, he can shoot to overcome that. But I do think the weight loss is at least something to watch for as the games start mattering more.
Yeah, and I think the final point, just to touch on what you're saying of like, can it be considered a success getting out of the first round? They shouldn't overreact. This team is still pretty young. Jokic is young. Murray's young. Okay, Millsap you might lose, but that's you got to start. They've been planning for this for a while. Like they should be on top of this, and that's kind of the hope is, can they develop Michael Porter Jr.? Can they, is Gary Harris a guy, or is he a guy we got to move? Is there a trade we can make? So it's not like the most exciting. They get out of the first round, like, yeah, we did the same thing we did last year. But, you lose in the first round, people are going to be crapping all over you, and you're going to have that label of, hey, these guys are just a regular season team. They're not a playoff team. And that's where it starts to get tough. And again, the honest truth is the Nuggets front office should not panic in any situation, no matter what happens. They're still young and they still got to build. I was never sold on this team being a championship level team yet.
Right. And I think what you touch on, because of the comment I made about them just making it out of the first round, you do need to, reconcile how tough the West still is. And so, yes, if you make it out of the first round, that is an accomplishment because it means you beat the Rockets or the Thunder or the Mavericks or whoever. And that certainly matters.
Can I ask you a question, Dan, completely unrelated? Because I just took a picture of you, a screenshot of you. But did you ever watch the show Deadliest Catch?
No.
Okay. Has anybody ever said to you look like Jake from The Deadliest Catch?
That's a new one. I will tell you who people have said I look like. A relative of Frankie Muniz.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And it looks like I look like Gru from Despicable Me.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And then it looks like who's the long necked one on Bert and Ernie? Is that Bert?
Yes.
I've also been told that I look like Bert had sex with Gru from Despicable Me. So
okay, well, somebody went in on you on that one.
Comment section. Don't always read it.
No, never do. But yeah, just add Jake from The Deadliest Catch. It's on today if anybody wants to watch Discovery Channel. That's a free ad.
I'm gonna Google that in just a second to see whether it's an insult or not. But first...
no, it's not. It's not.
Sports are back, and so are your chances to bet on your favorite teams and events. Major League Baseball is finally kicking off, and there's no better place to start wagering than our exclusive partners, BetOnline. Check out all the odds, futures, and props to bet on, all available 24/7. And with the return of sports, BetOnline sat down with former pro players Eddie George, Harold Reynolds, and seven-time NBA champ Robert Horry. See what they had to say on what it'll be like playing without fans in a series they're calling Fandemic. Visit betonline.ag for all your odds and up-to-date sports news. Remember to use promo code BLUEWIRE, all one word, to receive your new welcome bonus. That's promo code BLUEWIRE. BetOnline, your online wagering experts.
So, number 2 in the West right now, the Los Angeles Clippers. What are you watching for? What are you questioning about them leading into this regular season restart?
There are two things. Actually, no, just one thing, because they're before all this, I was questioning their size, but I think the addition of Joakim Noah has really helped them, and makes me feel a little bit better. I feel like you could throw him in as your third big in a situation. I think that's going to be a good spot for them. The real question is, have they played enough together? And maybe it might not matter at all because they're so damn talented, in the sense of just having Kawhi and Paul George, you already have a chance. Lou Williams and after his Magic City quarantine and all that stuff, I think, all of these things.
Wait, he's being quarantined in Magic City?
He wishes he was, but the situation. And I want to touch on that for a second afterwards, but I just think the chemistry, they've added a lot of pieces. Marcus Morris, in a trade, Reggie Jackson, now Joakim Noah, they haven't had the continuity of, Patrick Beverley, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George playing together for an entire season. I think they've played together maybe 30 games. I know PG and Kawhi, it's 32 games. So it's like, and they're good when they're together, but you still just need to have that sort of chemistry that, at least for me, I feel like they don't necessarily have. Now, I'm not with the team every day. It's not like I feel like I've seen everything, but it's something that is just not great. And I think they're good enough to overcome it. but it is a question I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair one. Mine would be, and as an X's and O's person, you might kill me for this one. I'm just wondering, there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all closing lineup, but I just want to see how their crunch time lineups end up looking. And specifically, is it more prevalent that Montrezl Harrell and or Lou Williams are left off them? Because I would argue that Lou Williams probably shouldn't be closing games for this team unless they're just all of a sudden hard up for scoring, which you can't really imagine having both PG and Kawhi Leonard. And then what kind of happens up front? Do you go small with Marcus Morris at the 5, or is that only a Rockets thing? Is JaMychal Green at the 5, which you haven't leaned on too much during the regular season, but worked well for you during last year's postseason stint? Like, does that become more of a staple for you in closing? Is Patrick Beverley a given in closing lineups? Does Landry Shamet factor into this at all if you want to go with all wings potentially? There are just so many different things they could do, and so my gut would be maybe they play the matchups a little bit more, but I am curious to see which makeup is the one that Doc Favors ends up really favoring, because we know Kawhi and PG are going to be the staples. And if you want to throw Patrick Beverley in there too, I might even say that. But then how do you flesh it out beyond that? Again, in a majority of the matchups.
I think, honestly, from what I've known of Doc, I think he values shooting on the floor. So I think it's a question of who's shooting it well between Marcus Morris and JaMychal Green. And mind you, Morris has not shot the 3-ball well as a Clipper.
No, he's just so much more comfortable with the ball in his hands. It's more of a combustible fit than I think people recognized.
And that was my problem with the trade when they made it, was just like, man, this is a ball stopper. This is a guy that's going to take 4 shots a game that he shouldn't take, that he goes one-on-one. And, I mean, we've seen it even in the scrimmages where I've seen it where, like, you have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard on the court, and yet you're trying to drive on a guy. Like, that ain't your game. Sorry. Like, with the Knicks, yes, because the Knicks suck. But the rest of the way, like, you have 2 top 10 players on your team that can get a bucket anytime. Your job is to spot up, catch and shoot, cut every now and then, and defend your ass off. And that's something that I think JaMychal Green actually does better than Marcus Morris.
You don't have to convince me. JaMychal Green stan over here.
But I think Doc's going to go with whichever one's shooting better. Or if Trez is on a roll, like they have closed lineups with Trez. And things like that. I don't think you can have Trez and Lou Williams. And that's a problem. And defensively, that's an issue.
Do you come back to this point that you made at the top about chemistry and continuity? Trez, Paul George, and Kawhi are actually a net negative when they're on the court together. And the sample size is small enough that you could throw it out the window, but it's not nothing either.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, because the way the year went, they're all small sample size to a degree, right? Not to what we're normally used to. But I just think in that scenario, and then whether it's Shamet, or Beverly, or even Reggie Jackson, like he has a lot of
too options. Since the Disney restart, yeah.
Yeah, you have a lot of options you have to look at. I'm curious to see how much Shamet's going to be hindered by having missed basically all of training camp. Mm-hmm. And the scrimmages. It'll be interesting to see what the scenario is with that and how his shooting is going to go, because it does take a minute to adjust. This is a shooting gym, by the way. I think this is a shooter's gym.
Buddy Hield was talking about that, about how the black backdrop actually helps shooters out a lot more as opposed to having a crowd behind the basket.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting to see how that stuff plays out through the year. So, the year for the rest of basically 3 months is a long ass time.
We'll see how Nuggets head coach Rick Carlisle feels about that comment.
yeah, Nuggets head coach Rick Carlisle. Good job on that one. Glad I caught that. Normally I might let you slide, but because it's you, I had to kill you. But the closing lineup is going to be a question for Doc that he's going to have to figure out. But again, they're so damn talented. You have 2 top
so much
10
optionality.
guys.
We didn't even mention Zubats, who was like one of the best rim protectors in the league this year.
But I don't think
he's not going to close. But that's how deep
I don't think Doc will close with him. Maybe Doc should, but I don't think Doc will. And I think that's something that's an issue sometimes for them.
Before you mentioned what you wanted to about Lou Williams and Magic City, how hard do you think the Clippers laughed when the Knicks were like, we'll do this trade for Marcus Morris if you put in that first round pick swap in 2021? That seems like the most pointless pick swap in recent memory or of all time.
Yeah, it just didn't make sense. It is what it is. It's like, all right, we're just dealing with crazy.
All right, so what is your Lou Williams Magic City take?
I think I have more issues with the fact that he should have just gotten this thing to go or postmated than actually gone to it, to pick up. We're making it's a big story because it's a strip club and everybody's going nuts. And I don't know if you saw this, Dan, but
I read it. I know what you're about to reference. I read it.
The Marlins Major League Baseball stuff.
Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Yes, you always think you know me, Dan, but you don't. I just saw on Twitter that they're saying the cause of the outbreak that the Marlins had, that's basically almost threatening Major League Baseball, is because they went to a strip club after playing exhibition games in Atlanta. So, let that marinate for a second, folks. Pause the podcast for just a split second. Let that marinate. Okay, we're back, and I need you to understand, my issue isn't that he went to a strip club. Okay, I don't care, it doesn't matter to me. If he did this at a cheesecake factory, he's taking extra risk that he didn't need to take. Yo, man, Uber Eats, Postmates, Grubhub, whatever you want. Not even that. You don't even have to be the one to go. Send Jack Harlow to go pick up the food. That's my issue. You're taking an extra risk that you didn't necessarily need to do. In that sense.
And that should be the only issue, too. I guess that those takes are still out. The opposite ones would be that. But I thought it was known that, and I've read pieces before that, Atlanta strip clubs, the food is a thing. And that wings at this place specifically were a thing. The Athletic, that's the piece I thought you were referencing, is they had Chris Kushner, I think his name is, went there for the wings and reviewed them. And so that isn't the issue. You're 100% right, is that there should have been more precautions taken. Why was he in there? Why did it seem like he was actually dining in there? And then what really worries me is that if Jack Harlow doesn't post this on Instagram, we never hear about it. And then he's just back in the bubble, only going through that 4-day quarantine.
Yes, and that's an issue. And I don't think, and people who might be upset with the 10-day quarantine that's leveled on Lou Williams and think it's a punishment. No, it's an extra precaution. Look what's happening with Major League Baseball right now. They've suspended all of the Florida Marlins baseball games right now because they don't know what to do. These dudes are in a bubble and they're trying to avoid this type of outbreak. So they have to take the extra precautions. And so, it was risky in that sense. And and in the moment, it probably didn't seem like a big deal to Lou Will, but that's the issue, and I don't care where he got the food from. If he was sitting in the McDonald's, I'd have an issue. It's all of those things. I go to pick up food. I'm telling you right now, I don't even want to walk in. It's an in and out situation. It's almost a dead sprint. Going to the grocery store.
We get it. You're in shape, Mo. You can sprint. Congratulations.
You should have seen the numbers today. But even the grocery stores, all these things, so it's just an extra risk that he took on that he didn't need to. And that's my issue with it. It's not he went to a strip club, to go get the food. And
I get what these players are undertaking. They're being asked a great deal of, but this is part of the package you agreed to at this point. As we've talked about, this return was collectively bargained, so the constraints that are placed upon your life. And it's dramatic, it's stark, but you did agree to play. And so that is, I'm with you 100%. The issue is how. It's not where. It's how he went about getting that food.
Yeah, it's brutal. So I think the NBA did the right thing in that scenario. Some people were like, yo, he should be walked out of the bubble. Everybody calm down. Relax.
Yep.
But they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do with the scenario and trying their best to protect the bubble. That's all. And I think he took an unnecessary risk. So that's the scary thing. Sorry for the sidetrack.
No, I enjoyed it. We are on to the final team, the first place Los Angeles Lakers, and they will finish in first place because they are so far out in front of everybody else. What are you watching for with this team during the regular season restart? And is it anything beyond the fate of Anthony Davis's eye injury?
Man, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, the eye injury thing. Which
now all of a sudden it's he might not be ready for Thursday.
I hope they're working on goggles right now. I hope they're dusting off the Kareem or James Worthy goggles and bringing that back. But that's something that I think a lot of players should consider. But that's a whole other podcast for another day. I think it's for the Lakers. We know what we're going to get from LeBron. If AD's on the court, we know what we're going to get from AD. Is what do the other guys do? and we always talk about when LeBron goes to the bench, their offense goes down. I think I wrote this in one of my pieces for Bleacher Report. Come playoff time, that's not going to matter that much. LeBron's playing 40-something minutes a game.
Right.
So it's can you survive the 4 minutes in the first half, the 4 minutes in the second half, with a LeBron-less lineup. And I think that's where it comes down to. Can Danny Green get hot? What does Dion Waiters bring as a second playmaker? And yes, I know it's an absurd sentence. I just said that, but this is the way 2020 has gone. J.R. Smith, can he hit shots?
That's an actual question now. Yes, correct.
It's been a long time since he's been on the court. Can he make shots? What can Kyle Kuzma do? Forget offensively. Can he defend? There have been times where he's looked good defensively. There are times where he looks terrible defensively. Can he consistently defend to help this team? It's going to come down to the role players, and everybody hates it when they're like, "Oh, it's going to be like LeBron didn't have help or whatever." No, we just know what we're going to get from LeBron. It's can the other guys elevate their game and continue to play the way they've played all year.
And yeah, mine's just along the same lines as yours, so I have minimal to add there. It's the numbers too. It's hysterical because the Lakers have actually experienced a starker drop off defensively without LeBron than offensively. There's been a drop off from them on both sides. I think that more so speaks to how not good their backup wing rotation really is on the perimeter when you're looking at defense, and just looking at some of the lineups Anthony Davis has had to try and carry without LeBron, and now Avery Bradley's gone. And so how are you picking up that slack? I think losing Rondo ends up being a net plus defensively. I know playoff Rondo is a thing. I know his ball handling kind of matters on offense with this team, but I think it ends up being a net plus for them overall. But now we're in a situation where it's, you can increase the workloads for Danny Green and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope a little bit because they were around 25 plus minutes a game. But then you're still looking to fill, just from Bradley specifically, between another 10 and 15 minutes per. Do those minutes go to Caruso? And what are you looking like offensively? Avery Bradley was one of the few league average 3-point shooters on this team, and he was one of their better on-ball defenders. You can't just replace that. And so everything you just asked, is J.R. Smith going to actually factor into this rotation? How much does Dion Waiters matter to them? What is it going to look like if we see Kuzma defending a lot more wings than he has during the regular season? It feels like these are questions we shouldn't actually have about a title contending team, and yet there's a very clear argument to be made that the Lakers are the absolute title favorite.
Yeah, I think there's a reason to make it, and his name is LeBron James.
He's pretty good.
He's not bad, guys. There's a reason why he's going to finish second in MVP voting. Like, I think, that's the level he's played at, and he's played defense this year, which is something we didn't normally see in the regular season for the past few years. So, they're a damn good team, and I think it's going to be, if we get Clippers, Lakers in the conference finals, that's going to be a hell of a series. And if we get one of those teams playing the Bucks in the finals, that's going to be a phenomenal series. Like, we're lining up for what could be a really amazing playoffs.
Do you know what would be encouraging about that being the end result is because it was the expectation before, and if those are the teams that make it, we can just, since we don't know what's going to happen, we can just assume that the level of play was high enough to where this didn't really feel like a separate season on its own.
I know we've gone a long time. I'm going to throw a curveball question at you, and then you can.
Yes, I know Mike Malone is the head coach of the Denver Nuggets. Jeez.
Are you sure?
I'm 99% sure.
Okay. The curveball question to you is, what team wins the title that makes you go like, maybe we should put an asterisk behind it?
It's hard to identify that team in the Western Conference, but if I don't even know. I guess if it was I don't have like a ready pick. Like, even if it was the Sixers, like, unless we know the Nets, the Magic, I'm going to throw the Pacers in there and they're out. If it's the Pelicans or the 8th seed in the West, maybe like if the Blazers come back and they're able to win it, but do you have a clear pick for that? Because I don't.
I have one team. I actually have two teams. One is Houston, right? Because this is the year for them to win it when it's been so weird and screwed up. And the other team is Philly to me. And I think Philly actually has a pretty good chance. I like their odds more now than I did in March. Let me put it to you that way. They're fully healthy, whole deal, everything like that. They're making changes into how they're playing and stuff. Ben Simmons shot a couple of threes that looked actually natural. So it's like, yeah. So like if they were to win the championship, I mean, it wouldn't be the outcome I thought we would have gotten in June.
Oh, for sure. I think there's a plenty of teams that fit that mold. It just doesn't, like, would it have been completely absurd to pick the Sixers to come out of the East beforehand, or ditto for the Rockets? I guess the argument here would be the teams that benefited the most from the break when looking at them getting to full strength. Simmons was injured. They didn't even think he was going to be ready when the regular playoffs were supposed to start.
Right.
Al Horford was banged up. And then with Houston, it's always been Harden is kind of tuckered out by the playoffs. Now he's getting this rest. So definitely from that aspect, then yeah, I totally see it for the Rockets and Philly. And also with Philly, would they have made this stylistic shift where they're putting Shake Milton into the starting lineup had the season gone about as normal? And again, they might not have had that opportunity because of Ben Simmons' injury.
Yeah, it would have been. It'd have been. That's my weird. If they do win it, and I think they can. I think they have a legitimate shot. I just think I could just see a lot of people going with the asterisks, and I probably wouldn't be all that upset about it.
Do you have a title pick? Is the final thing I will ask you.
No.
Did you make a preseason title pick?
I think I did. I think I picked the Clippers. Here was the thing. All year long, I was just going back and forth between the Clippers and the Lakers.
No Bucks?
And then there were times where it was the Bucks. My thing with the Bucks is like, I don't know. They played so well. I wasn't sure if they had another gear. And it's not a matter of like they're always in fifth gear. Mm-hmm. And like there are times where the Clippers were literally just playing in second gear and just chilling, and things like that. And I think the Clippers can hit another level. Like we've seen the best of the Bucks, how their whole thing, and I just don't know. I think it's a challenge for them against the Lakers or Clippers in the finals.
My argument against that would be, what if the Bucks went from playing Giannis 30 minutes a game to 38 minutes per game? Is that their next level?
I mean, it's going to help. I think we're going to see that. I mean, he played 36 last year in the playoffs, so it's that stuff. The other thing too, it's probably moot now because everybody's starting from almost the same point in terms of conditioning wise. Like I had concerns and I had questions of, you've conditioned Giannis's body throughout the entire year to play 30 minutes a game, and now you're going to turn it up and ask him to play 38. It's not that you can do it one game, you can do it 2 games, but asking him to do that all of a sudden without kind of ramping that up was a concern of mine in terms of the, his body handling it. And it's not a matter of me questioning his body or whether he's in shape. It's just his body was conditioned for one thing. Changing that, it takes time. So that would have been my thing. I'm not sure how much of a difference that makes. I mean, they've blown teams out all year. So, they're the odds-on favorite to at least get to the finals.
Yeah, I mean, and look, it's been an extended time now where Giannis hasn't played too many minutes. 32.8 last regular season, 30.9 this year, and 34.3 during last year's playoffs. I wonder if there's an element of protecting him against himself because they know he's probably conditioning himself to the brink of exhaustion, like outside the games.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, there are guys who go hit the treadmill after games, and that's kind of a normal thing. I don't know if that's a Giannis thing or not, but, a lot of that's usually guys who don't play and they have to keep their conditioning up. But, wouldn't shock me if I heard stories of like, oh, Giannis didn't feel like he got enough of a sweat in, so he ran 20 minutes on the treadmill.
That would not surprise me either. Mo, thank you so much for this. This was fun. I appreciate your return to the podcast. If you guys are not following Mo on Twitter, remedy that, as I always say, immediately at Mo.Dakhil_NBA. That's at MODAKHIL_NBA. And believe it or not, Mo, I can say this with absolute confidence. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be pestering you again in the future. I thoroughly enjoyed this, so thank you so much for coming on.
You're my guy, Dan. Anytime.